The conflict in Sudan is part of a larger pattern of civil wars, coups, and political instability inside the African continent that's changing the course of history. I think the aspirations of Africa's massively growing populations are at the heart of these conflicts, as they seek to assert their sovereignty, protect their resources, and shape their own destinies. The first thing you need to know is in 2019, there were widespread pro-democracy protests that ousted Sudan's longtime dictator Omar al-Bashir from his 30-year reign. After the military overthrew him, they pledged to install civilian democratic rule. We'll put civilians in control ASAP, trust me bro. As a result of that coup, the US removed Sudan from its state sponsor of terrorism list and prepared $700 million in development aid for the new democracy. This development brought a glimmer of hope for a country that's had to deal with war and poverty for decades. The Sudanese military arrested then Prime Minister Hamdok and dissolved the government in 2021. General al-Burhan promised to restore democracy with general elections in 2023. But instead, Sudan found themselves in civil war when the country's biggest paramilitary group, called the Rapid Support Force, RSF, attacked the military on April 15, 2023. I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, don't the events in Africa have nothing to do with me? I mean, outside of the fact that we should care about people suffering in other conflict zones, there might be some more pragmatic reasons as to why this affects you. Whoever wins this fight, it'll have a ripple effect that'll have global repercussions felt by all of us, no matter where we live. This is in part because Sudan basically hit the geographical jackpot that has shaped their country's destiny and granted them strategic importance. The first is that they're located right on the Red Sea, which is where about 10% of the global trade passes through thanks to the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal is a critical maritime artery that connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. Sudan's 750-kilometer-long Red Sea coastline is incredibly important because it's a trade hub for neighboring landlocked countries like Chad, Ethiopia, and Central Africa. The Red Sea is key to the US Navy because it links the US 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean with the 5th Fleet in the Arabian Gulf. This video's sponsor is Fume, the flavorful way to break free. Fume is an innovative and award-winning solution to changing the way you break free from your habit. With no electronics, Fume is completely natural. No vapors or smoke, just the stuff we all love so much, good clean air. With the world embracing modern solutions to old problems, why should breaking bad habits be any different? If you have nervous, fidgety fingers, you're in luck. Because Fume is perfectly balanced, it has some weight to it, and it's extremely fun to fidget with, which is helpful for de-stressing while breaking your habit. We all put stopping off because it's hard to do, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and fun. Fume has served over 100,000 customers and has thousands of success stories. So head to tryfume.com/taskpurpose or scan the QR code and use code TASKPURPOSE to get 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use code TASKPURPOSE to save an additional 10% off your order today. That's fresh. The second is that Sudan is home to where the White and Blue Nile rivers merge into the main Nile River, with 60% of the Nile Basin in their territory. They're upstream from Egypt, who depends on the security and safe management of the water resource. Egypt is keen on keeping a friendly military dictatorship on its southern border. For Egypt, access to water from the Nile makes Sudanese politics a vital national security interest. Another major card that Sudan has up their sleeve is their massive gold mines that outside foreign powers have sought to exploit.
It is estimated that over 50% of Sudan's gold is smuggled out of the country, with proceeds frequently used to finance the internal conflict.
According to financial investigations, this appears to be the primary source of funding for the RSF. It's kind of like if Sudan is where X marks the spot on a treasure map and there's a giant gold treasure chest located here, and every major foreign power in the world is a pirate just dying to get a piece of it. On top of that, Africa is in general becoming increasingly more important on the world stage, because it's estimated that by 2050, 1 in every 4 people in the world will live in Africa. So if you want to move to where all the cool kids are going, it's in Africa. Africa's demographic shift is a global megatrend. It has major implications for global consumer markets in the future. This is because more than half of Africa's 54 different nations are estimated to double by 2050, thanks in part to fast improving mortality rates. I think this, combined with the fact that 60% of the world's arable land is located here, means Africa is poised to become an important geopolitical player in the future. The interconnectedness of our globalized world today means that conflicts in far-flung regions can have far-reaching consequences affecting economies and humanitarian concerns worldwide. This confrontation has been a culmination of long-standing tensions within Sudan. The battle here has been compared to a Game of Thrones-style fight between the two most powerful men in Sudan. General Burhan, the de facto leader of the country / Sudan Armed Forces, and Mohamed Daglo, the leader of the Rapid Support Force. While Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United States are in favor of supporting the Sudan Armed Forces, the UAE, Russia, and the Wagner Group are in favor of supporting the RSF. Both Russia and the Wagner Group have profited from RSF-controlled gold mines. You might be familiar with the RSF because according to the US Treasury Department, the Wagner Group in Russia has been supplying Sudan's Rapid Support Forces with surface-to-air missiles to fight against Sudan's army. It'd be kind of like if the Army National Guard fought against the regular US Army to try to overthrow the government. It's not a perfect one-to-one analogy, but it's just to help illustrate what's going on in the country to put some sort of perspective on it. I think this pattern of instability is reflective of broader challenges faced by many African nations as they grapple with issues of governance, development, and resource management. But one thing is for sure, if the violence is not stopped quickly here, there is a high risk of the conflict becoming entrenched for years and entangling larger regional and foreign powers. Because the US, Russia, and China all have important strategic interests on the African continent. It appears like the pattern of conflict that we're witnessing might just be growing pains. It's that awkward teenage phase of international relations where you're rebellious, causing a ruckus, trying to figure things out. The people of these nations are fighting to determine the direction of their future. Many of these nations are tired of being exploited by foreign powers for decades, but overthrowing one government hasn't guaranteed that the new one will deliver better conditions for the people. One theory of what's happening across Africa right now is that people are fighting to get rid of Western-backed governments that have taken advantage of their resources and controlled their foreign policy. Another theory is that they're replacing these Western powers with Russian and Chinese companies and mercenaries that are doing the same exact thing. It's like trying to choose between two different prison systems. Sudan, a country of 45 million people and growing, has a political history plagued with military-induced coups. Less than 2 years after Sudan gained independence from the United Kingdom and Egypt in 1956, the democratic parliament was toppled by a bloodless 1958 coup led by the defense minister and two top military generals, Ibrahim Abadad and Ahmed Abd al-Hawab. This early event in Sudan's modern political history normalized coups as a means to transfer political power. It became a pastime, a national tradition. Since 1956, Sudan experienced at least 35 known coup attempts. All 6 of the successful coups in 1958, 69, 85, 89, 2019, and 2021 have 2 key similarities in common. There's a common denominator here. They were orchestrated by the military, and they often toppled Sudan's latest foray into parliamentary democracy. A 1969 coup by Colonel Ghaffar Nimiri replaced democracy in Sudan with Nimiri's 16-year dictatorship. Then, in 1989, a coup by Sudanese military replaced Sudan's latest attempt at democracy with the 30-year dictatorship of Omar al-Bashir. Sudan's last dictator, al-Bashir, attempted to coup-proof his regime by creating a parallel security force that he could balance against the military. This way, competition between the military and his own paramilitary group would occupy these groups' energies and insulate al-Bashir so that he wouldn't have to get overthrown by them. Al-Bashir used the Darfur conflict in 2003 to build this parallel security force by consolidating pro-government Arab militias fighting in the region. In 2003, 2 groups, the Sudan Liberation Movement (SLM) and the Justice and Equality Movement (JEM), rose up against the government for oppressing non-Arab groups. In response, Arab nationalists and Islamic militias consolidated, becoming the Janjaweed, with violence drawn along ethnic lines. Between 300,000 and 1 million civilians were killed in a genocide perpetrated by the Janjaweed. Today, the Darfur region of Sudan is still a dangerous place, with Arab militias continuing to terrorize local non-Muslims. After the fighting died down in 2008, the International Criminal Court, ICC, put an arrest warrant out for al-Bashir for crimes against humanity. Insulated from ICC investigations, Janjaweed leadership remained mainly under the radar. With a little good old-fashioned marketing, the Janjaweed rebranded themselves from sociopathic genocidal militia to elite government security forces, becoming the Rapid Support Force, RSF, in 2013. Their leader, formerly known as Hemedti or Little Muhammad in the militia, also rebranded himself and began going by the more official General Mohammed Dagalo. But for some reason, whenever I try to rebrand myself as Sergeant Major of the Army, they say, "Sir, this is a Chili's restaurant, please leave." In 2011, we saw South Sudan broke off and took 75% of Sudan's oil reserves away. This reduction in funds meant that al-Bashir wasn't able to bribe all the people he needed in order to keep the system running. Unfortunately for al-Bashir, he done goofed. His attempts to coup-proof failed miserably when the RSF and the Sudanese military teamed up Avenger-style to end his 30-year reign after widespread pro-democracy protests in 2019. The military placed al-Bashir under house arrest, but refused to extradite him to the ICC. However, this is when some people believe overseas governments stepped in and wanted to take advantage and benefit from the fact that Sudan was going through a transitional phase. These countries sought to benefit from Sudan's strategic and mineral wealth of resources. China, Germany, Qatar, the United States, Russia are just some of the largest foreign investors here. For example, Sudan agreed to give Russia gold in exchange for them training their militia. Russia helped Sudan increase their gold mining production from 30 tons per year to 100 tons, of which Russia takes 70% of the gold. Each ton of gold is worth about $50 million, which works out in average infantry math to an estimated $3 billion a year. This is why some people are saying Sudan's gold is paying for Russia's war in Ukraine. Seeing his position of power slip and probably feeling the heat from his genocidal past in Darfur, General Dagalo decided the time was right to attack the Sudanese Armed Forces before he lost control of the RSF. The Rapid Support Force has approximately 100,000 fighters deployed across Sudan. This is slightly less than the 120,000 active duty troops in the Sudan Armed Forces. What they lack in numbers, the RSF makes up for combat experience. In 2019, the RSF sent 1,000 fighters to Libya in support of the Libyan National Army. From 2016-2017, the RSF deployed up to 40,000 troops to Yemen to assist the Gulf states in Yemen's civil war. Combat experience is not the only benefit the RSF has reaped from fighting in Yemen. Fighting on the ground for both Saudi Arabia and the UAE helped the RSF gain international connections and provided them an opportunity to find outside support. The paramilitary group lacks air power and armor, and instead makes up for it with fast and agile technicals, mainly Toyota Land Cruisers and Hilux 4x4 pickup trucks mounted with machine guns, anti-tank weapons, rocket launchers, and small arms. They're well suited for remote desert patrols and urban fighting. Open source intelligence compiled by globalwitness.org indicates that the RSF imported over 1,000 vehicles in 2019 from dealerships in Dubai before converting them into technicals. This makes the RSF more agile on the ground, capable of conducting fast attacks, and then withdrawing before Sudan's armed forces can scramble jets or mobilize armor and artillery to respond. Access to small arms and ammunition in Sudan to supply the RSF is easy to find. According to the Small Arms Survey, Sudan has over 3 million weapons among the civilian and military, with 6.57 guns for every 100 civilians. Video released on Twitter shows RSF fighters well armed with Chinese FN-6 manpads and G3A4 rifles, likely either sourced from Saudi Arabia for the purpose of fighting Houthi rebels in Yemen or tactically acquired from the Sudanese military. The RSF has deeper ties with Russia's Wagner Group though. Claims from the Pentagon and independent investigations from CNN indicate the Wagner Group ferried weapons to the RSF, including advanced surface-to-air missiles. Wagner ties with the RSF go back to 2017 and are centered around an exchange of weapons, training, and assistance in exchange for access to RSF-controlled gold mines. Nothing comes free, and nothing is out of the goodness of the heart of Wagner forces. Local gold miners in the region told German news outlet DW, anywhere the Russians go, RSF goes with them. The Sudanese Armed Forces has 120,000 active duty troops, with thousands more in reserve. Sudan has its own military industry. One side is able to produce their own weapons and ammunition, including artillery, armor, and tanks, while the other is bumming Toyotas from Dubai. One of the most significant advantages that Sudan's armed forces have over the RSF is their access to armor and air power. This edge on hardware and troops creates a formidable obstacle even for the RSF's fast and battle-tested militiamen. Tracking who occupies what is difficult, but thanks to social media and open source intelligence savants, there is some idea of how the fighting is progressing. A live Google conflict tracker map published by a user on Twitter shows the RSF maintaining a strong central hold over most of the capital city. The majority of the fighting in the capital appears to be centered around the international airport, government buildings, and key bridges that cross over the Nile River, which flows directly through the heart of the city. According to an article from the New York Times, a major battle erupted near Kobar prison on the north side of the city, where the former dictator Omar al-Bashir was being held. Sudan's Kobar Bridge, the Ministry of Defense building, the Ministry of Energy and Mining building, and the military headquarters buildings all appeared to be bombed. Several reports from civilians in the area indicate that RSF troops occupying, looting, and destroying civilian homes and apartments in the surrounding neighborhoods. The RFS appears to control a single route running east towards their heartland in Darfur. The route in Arabic translates to 40 Road. Most of the RSF territory is based in the eastern Darfur region along the border with Chad. The majority of RSF Arab militia fighters hail from this region and continue to operate with impunity among the local population there. According to the New York Times, by the end of the day on the 15th, Rapid Support Forces claimed on Twitter that they controlled most of the country's military installations, including an airport. However, facts on the ground remain hazy. By April 16th, the SAF announced the capture of 6 RSF bases. In a press release seen by the Sudan Tribune, the army stated that it had taken control of the RSF militia base and headquarters in Port Sudan. It's hard to know who exactly controls what, as both sides attempt to spin a narrative that they're in control. Most of the fighting between the SAF and RSF remains contained within Sudan's capital. However, regions in Darfur are also falling victim to old violence. Fighting is reported across Darfur cities. This forced thousands of civilians to flee across the border with Chad. The civil war that started in Sudan is at high risk of falling into an entrenched turmoil backed by powerful outside states. The conflict in Libya, it's been ongoing since 2011 after the fall of Muammar Gaddafi, sets an example for what could become the once promising nation. Even worse, this conflict has the potential to engulf other bordering nations in spillover violence like Chad, Ethiopia, and other countries. All the while, war profiteering from sanctioned groups like Wagner offer weapons used to kill Sudanese for their national wealth and resources. Sudan is a case that is also at risk of being overshadowed by Russia's war in Ukraine. At Spare Parts Army, we aim to shed light on the overlooked cases with the intent of raising awareness with the average infantryman. As of May 2023, the Sudanese American Physician Association recorded at least 820 civilian deaths and over 3,000 wounded. If after watching this video you are inspired and are able to provide donations for relief, please visit some of the links in the description below to donate to organizations actively trying to manage the massive humanitarian crisis brought on by the fighting. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Thank you for watching. We leave 2 options for you to check out different videos if you have another minute. Thank you.